It's Talk Funny, a podcast by Mark Bailey and other comics from all over. We ended up in Japan because we wanted to sit so close on the train that we can hear the thoughts of the person next to us. The Talk Funny podcast from Nagoyaradio.com and Nagoyacomedy. Here's Mark Bailey.
Welcome back to another edition of Talk Funny. I'm Mark Bailey, and we're here with Mike Miller.
Hello.
And we have an announcement to make. Everybody just wait. Just wait, guys, until we make the announcement. This is our official 2-year anniversary of the Talk Funny podcast. Freedom!
How did all those people get in here?
I told you to lock the door, Mike. Settle down. Yeah, so it's been 2 years of the podcast, and what have you learned on this podcast? We must be like 25 hours worth of material now. That's more than all the Beatles songs played back to back.
Wow. We've made history.
And that's like 3 Joe Rogan podcasts.
That's like 3 stories about trail cams of, mustaching
bears
across the
attacking
road.
Guys on video.
Guys.
Videos played on audio podcasts.
That's about like 3 Adam Carolla rants.
Which reminds me, Adam Carolla. The thing
about
with him
passion
is
fruit iced tea.
When he talks, when he tells a story, he just never ends a sentence. We were talking earlier about the writing process, and something I mentioned to Steve on an earlier podcast is I was talking to some of the open micers, and they were asking for advice. Basically, what they said to me was, I walk around with a notepad, and I'm looking for something funny, but I don't find it. No, you don't look for something funny. You walk around, and it happens to you. Life happens to you, and you just think maybe you'll learn to write these down when they happen to you, but you go like, well, that's an odd phrase that someone said to me. That's weird. And you write it down, you think about it for a week, and maybe you'll end up finding a way to make that ironic or funny, but you don't really find funny things. You walk around and find something that makes you angry, or you find something that you're asking yourself, isn't it backwards? Shouldn't it be the other way? Or you're walking around and you say, well, that's strange. I can't believe she said that. That's what she thinks is important. And so at assportjapan@yahoo.com, you can contact us. We've gotten some comments, and people have said they appreciate the general way that we explained, that Tim and I and Steve and I and Mike and I have explained when you're on a train and you have a notepad or something or a sound file on your iPhone and you make notes of something. But they wanted specific examples if you could have one. So I'll do one of mine first, and I don't know if you have one or not, Mike, but we have one where a lot of this will come from these documentaries. We were joking about Marie Kondo, her Netflix special, and I'm smitten with her. I just love watching her, so I don't care what she can come tidy this room up anytime she wants.
This would be a whole season, I think, of her show.
Oh, by the way, look out the window here. I don't know if you can see it, but the Horror in the High Castle, they have built a building in between.
Awesome.
So now she's going to have to move to that building right across.
And how much did you have to pay the developer to build it there?
Well, I know this guy. He's a president now, and I used to know him in Queens, and he pulled some strings for me. Here's an example. Let's see. Sometimes I'll be watching a documentary. These jokes will come. Now, these are not drop-dead jokes. These are examples of things that I make into a joke, and it may not be the funniest joke in my whole set, but it's part of it. So here's one. It's a Netflix special, and it's called The Innocent Man. And it's about these 4 guys, and they're in Oklahoma, and these 2 girls get raped and murdered. And I wrote that down. I'm like, well, that would be fun to talk. No,
this is the fun part of the
podcast. So that's not the funny part. They got the wrong guys, put them in prison. The short version of it is, when DNA testing became available, Barry Scheck, who was involved in the O.J. Simpson case, he's an expert on DNA, and he got these guys released. It's called the Freedom Project. Oh, yeah. John Grisham, the novelist, wrote a nonfiction book about these guys. They're interviewing the different people, and they finally caught the guy who did it. So justice was served, but these 4 guys served like 12 to 19 years, and it ruined their lives. They were in prison, so their teeth were falling out, literally. Oh, God. And one of the guys, who was a former baseball player, and they ruined his life. He was in prison for 12 years, and judge kind of said, okay, you can go now, you're free, He drank himself to death in a period of like 5 years. So after he got out of prison, he lived for 5 years, miserable, poor existence, and then he died. It's just a tragedy for everyone. And you didn't find the killers of these 2 girls. So it's still not the funny part. Stop laughing.
And this went over really well at the last comedy night, just to let you guys know.
Yeah, so that was my closer, and nobody laughed, and I don't know. No, so people are going, you have to keep watching for things that stick out to you. That's how I would put it. If you're a comic and you're writing, things that stick out to you, something that bothers you. Like, there was an example of a lady who went to Switzerland to try to kill herself. She was a French lady, and she tried to kill herself. They gave her chocolate and cyanide, and at the end, she asked for more chocolate, and the nurse said, "No, you're just going to get it all over the bed sheets." I'm sorry. A little compassion with a lady who's committing suicide, you know? So you take these dark topics, but you find this one anomaly or one thing that kind of keeps you up at night. You keep going like, I wonder why she said that in the interview. And so in this Netflix special, they caught the real guy, put him in prison. The mother of one of the girls who went missing, she goes, yeah, he gave more details. I just wanted to know from the guy, why did you do it? Why did you kill my daughter? And he said how he did it and the things that he used. And the thing that he used to strangle her was this cowboy belt. And she said, I had bought her that cowboy belt for Christmas. And the question that keeps me up at night, this is the lady, the mom of the victim. She goes, I keep asking myself, why did he have to use something that I bought her to kill her? Really? That's your biggest regret? That you lost your daughter? It would have been okay. Why couldn't you use something Mike bought her? Why do you have to use something that I bought her to kill her?
Yeah.
Really?
Could you use something that was store-bought, maybe not related to me in some way?
Is that the biggest problem with your daughter's murder? Seriously?
Yeah.
So it's basically, I guess you could call it misplaced emphasis.
Yeah.
And you're obsessed with the wrong part of the murder. That was funny to me.
Yeah.
It's that made me laugh. And,
That's good. I like that.
Then I have a fight with my wife because she goes, what are you watching that's so funny? Oh, it's just about these two girls that get killed.
Didn't happen to me.
I said, but that wasn't the only
funny.
That wasn't the only funny part. There's this bit about the cowboy belt that I'm going to use on stage. That's the funny part. So that's how I come up with, it basically, comedy comes from tragedy most of the time, a lot of the time. It's truth and tragedy plus time. And as Gilbert Gottfried once said, how do you know when it's too soon? He said, well, for me, the 9/11, when the towers fell, he goes, for me, the timing that would be right was I started making jokes between the first tower and when the second tower fell.
I think the rule is once the blood starts to congeal.
And then I had another story. I don't know if you have one ready, but I have another story where this is not the funny part, but I had an uncle and he committed suicide. He was always cracking up people like that. He was always he had depression. He had been in prison. And I remember when I first went back to the States, he was free and he was out of prison. And he wanted to buy me dinner. He wanted to talk to me and so you're living in Japan, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, what do you want to eat? And he goes, I wouldn't mind trying Japanese food. I've never had it. Let's go. We went to a sushi restaurant, and he goes, he whispered in my ear and he goes, I didn't read a lot in prison and I don't know the trends and I don't know actually how to order. I haven't ordered in, 20 years from a menu. So if you could just order for me. And I said, well, when I get something, if you like it, just say, I'll have what he's having. Just say that to the waitress. So the waitress came over to this Japanese restaurant. She gave us, the oshibori, the hot towels, She brought one to me and she put another one on the table, and he didn't know what that was. And so she goes, are you ready to order? And he goes, I'll have what he's having. And I just had an oshibori. And she goes, do you want another hot towel? So to me, that was funny because it's inappropriate. Yeah. And it's kind of like the funny side of him being in prison is that he inadvertently made a joke about ordering a hot towel. Those are free. He's like, is that expensive? And I said, those are free. I said, we haven't ordered yet.
That is good.
And so, that's just an example. It's not ready for Netflix, but that's an example of how you can find ordinary life, something that strikes you as odd. Somebody will say a weird phrase. Like, people will usually say, break a leg. And then my wife would sometimes say, you're going to show break a neck. Well, that's odd, right? So, and I write that down. Now, a normal non-comic will just let that slide and not notice, right? But you have to observe. Have you ever observed, Mike, that women all go to the restroom at the same time? Oh, wait, that's one time. Have you ever noticed that airline food is not that good?
Yeah.
You ever notice that? So that's a tick off on the 80s observational comedy. But you do have to be observant, don't you think, to be a comic? Right. Have you ever noticed? You ever noticed that you have to actually be observant?
Right. You're right. Well, all that I've noticed is those CD wrappers, man. I can never get those CDs out of the wrappers. I don't know.
And it's so topical, too.
It's very topical these days. Millennials, a CD is a round piece of plastic that you put inside a thing called a CD player, and then you press play.
For that lady the 88-year-old lady, that New York lady that we met, the lady from Brooklyn we met at a party. Yeah. If she's listening, a CD is like an old-fashioned record player, a disc. Yeah. An album or an LP. They used to be 16 RPMs, and then they went up to 33 and sometimes 45. But first year, it's cool, but that's a long story.
Actually, it's more like one of the, maybe she's more familiar with the Edison, the wax, whatchamacallit, cylinders. It's kind of like one of those.
Right. I guess the point is, what I've noticed about observational comics is they're very observant, and they do observe a lot.
Wow, that's a great observation, Mark.
But your average person is just letting life go by, and they're not taking notes. If you take notes, you're going to find some things that are odd. They're not going to be funny, and what you do is you take your point of view, and to you, it's funny. I bet I'm the only person that watched that on Netflix and laughed at the cowboy outfit, because I was dropped on my head when I was a kid.
That's happened to me too sometimes when you're watching, like I was watching the new, not new, it's kind of old movie now, that Netflix thing, Velvet Buzzsaw, which is this, it's kind of a combination of a movie about crazy people in the art world and the typical horror movie. And you just see, because it's a horror movie, and you see all of the things, and kind of what's coming next. And it was just funny to see how they executed it, and you laugh. Like, I didn't find it scary at all. I found it funny. And a lot of people who don't know that kind of, maybe they're not used to horror movies or whatever, and they haven't seen one, they might find it scary. But it strikes you in that way because the pattern kind of, it's something a little bit, sometimes it's just something you recognize that you can appreciate in that way.
Right. Like writers do this too, just novelists. They're not even writing funny novels, but they'll notice Mike's sweater, and they'll notice what it's made of, and they'll be very descriptive of the clothes and everything. And normal people don't do that. I met a guy, if you're a novelist, Mike will ask, well, what was he wearing? Well, that's not really important. It's what I said. It's what he said. That's what it's important. But when you're building a picture, you just have to observe things and make notes. And the more notes you make, the more you get used to just writing it down, the better you'll get at it. And you'll be able to just look at something and say, well, that's odd.
Yeah, you just go around, you collect little nuggets of things, little ideas in your notebook. And then, for me, everyone's always saying, well, what's your process? I don't think there is a magical process. I think it's just you have nuggets of ideas, you write them down, and then you sit down at a desk and you turn off your phone and you turn off your computer and you stare at a blank wall. And you'll be amazed what will come to you when you're staring at a blank wall and you're bored out of your mind.
As we were saying earlier, when Taro Aso, this politician who says inappropriate things.
Deputy Prime Minister, I think. He's a Minister of Finance, technically, maybe?
And he says inappropriate things a lot of times. All you have to do is just write down what he says. We mentioned this before, but he mentioned that the low birth rate in Japan, he blamed that on women not reproducing more. All you have to do is take that, okay, that's a fact that he said that. You write it down, and then you ask yourself questions. Could that be the only reason that the birth rate is low? How about tsunamis?
Right.
Does that have an effect? How about unnecessary wars?
Right.
Like when you attack Pearl Harbor and stuff. Did that have anything to do with it, right? How about Hiroshima? Did that have something to do with the population? So just ask yourself questions, and these questions are funny because a lot of times they're inappropriate.
Yeah.
I have another one from that Netflix special. I got 2 knee slapper jokes out of that special about 2 murders. The one called The Innocent Man. Another one I noticed. Okay,
Mark's method is watch a documentary about killers on Netflix.
Don't get me started on Schindler's List, man. I have a whole hour on that. No, I'm kidding.
You're stealing from Jesselnick.
Yeah, exactly. Here's another example, and it's not Drop Dead Funny. It's just these are examples, but these are real examples, so hopefully they're helpful. There was one in Netflix at the beginning. They're trying to set the mood for what a small, friendly, local town. It's Ada, Oklahoma. It's a very, very small town. They have a lot of churches there. And they try to show that one of the lubricants for the community is the pastors. They kind of have their finger on the pulse of the community. And if you were a priest, I'd say, priest, that's not your finger.
And that's not the pulse either.
Yeah. No, I said put it in her Volvo. Get your hands off of her. Put it in her Volvo. It's a 68 Volvo. That's what I said.
Don't put it in the Saab.
So they're showing this preacher and how gregarious he was. That was the point. In documentaries, you kind of build atmosphere, and that's what they were doing.
Right.
But they had something that caught my ear. When the preacher is walking around going, how you doing? How you doing? How you doing? Are you doing good? Yeah, Pastor. How you doing? I'm doing good. He had this comment, this joke that he thought was funny, that I don't think is funny. And he goes, if I was any happier, I'd be triplets. You know what I mean? And then he'd walk on and say it to another person, and they just laugh it off. They go, yeah, I know what you mean.
A fake laugh, yeah.
Yeah. I don't think I do know what that means. What does that mean? If I were any happier, I'd be triplets. What does it mean, Mike?
I have no idea.
He asked a question in the documentary, do you know what I mean? So I paused it, and I asked myself, do I know what he means? No, I don't. So then you just write questions. Why would you be happier if you were triplets? So the egg split in the womb, and you'd be happier if the egg split in the womb?
I think it's a reference to Matthew 3:24, the loaves and the triplets. You haven't read...